Hey everybody, welcome to this week's blog and video. I'm going to share this week about 3 of the bullet points that come from the blog I wrote, the 10 things I quit that made a huge difference in my life. How I quit blaming myself for the death of our son Kyle Jr., how I quit blaming my wife for the death of our son Joey, and how I quit believing that I had to fully understand it for it to be true or for it to be truth. Have you ever done something so bad that you thought you could never forgive yourself for it? Or maybe someone has done something to you so bad that you thought you could never forgive them for it. On October 28, 2007, it was around 8 p.m. or so. Chris and I had just sat down to watch a movie, and the phone rang, and it was our son Kyle Jr. He was calling to ask if he could get a ride home from his girlfriend's house. I had explained to him that we had just sat down to watch a movie and asked him if he would mind calling his friend to give him a ride home. Kyle rode with this friend probably 100 times before, and Kyle said, "No problem, Dad, I'll call and ask him and get back to you." So a couple minutes later, the phone rang. Kyle said, "Good news, Dad. He said he'd come and give me a ride. I'll be home shortly." And I remember saying, "All right, son, drive safe. Love you." And he said, "Love you too, Dad." Kyle should have been home by now. And just about that time, there was a knock on the door. I went and answered the door, and it was a police officer. And the police officer said, "Are you Mr. Hoffman?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "There's been a terrible accident." And he said, Kyle's friend said his name. He said, "He's dead on the scene. And Kyle, your son, is being medevaced to Fairfax Hospital. It's very serious, sir. You need to get there right away." And I remember I fell to the floor. I just collapsed and thought I was going to puke. Chris came walking in the room and said, "What's going on?" And the officer told her, and I remember she said, "Get up, we've got to go." The next day, Kyle died. And as I went through the process of losing my second son, as I went through the grieving process, there was a point where I started to blame myself. If I would have just got up off that couch, things would be different. I believed that a choice I made killed my son. Now, I knew that I was going to have to talk to somebody about this. And so I did, and as I did, I learned a couple of things. The first one that I learned is that when something bad happens in my life, I tend to need to find somebody or something to blame for it. The second thing I learned was that I was blaming Chris for the death of our son Joey about this. So I asked my advisors or counselors what to do, and they said I was going to need to talk to Chris about it. So as you would imagine, I had apprehension, but eventually the day came where I knew I was going to talk to Chris, and it looked something like this. I came home and I said, "Honey, I need to talk to you, and it's important." And we turned everything off. I sat her down on the couch. I held her hand. I got down on one knee, and I told her that I've been praying and talking to people, and I realized that I have been blaming her for Joey's death. If she would have been at the bus stop that day, that maybe things would have been different. I told her that I realized that I was wrong and it wasn't her fault, and that I had asked God to forgive me, and now I wanted to ask her to forgive me. Well, my wife, with tears streaming down her face, said, "I've been blaming you for Kyle's death. If you would have got up off the couch, things would be different. But I realize that it's not your fault. And so I want to ask you to forgive me." In some way, we were both not only blaming each other for the death of the boys, but we blamed ourselves equally. Now, I can't explain what happened in this moment, because it's bigger than me and bigger than life. Or maybe I should say he is bigger than me and bigger than this life. But somehow we forgave ourselves and each other in a moment. The tumor of blame, resentment, and unforgiveness was removed in an instant from our marriage and from our minds. This is one of those things that I don't have to understand it for it to be true. I only have to accept it. No more blame, no more resentment, no more unforgiveness, only freedom and peace of mind in this house and in this marriage. Front row seats to miracles. I hope you'll consider visiting again next week when I'm going to share about how I quit hanging out with the wrong people and started to surround myself with the right people. And it's a story titled Trust and how it changed my perspective. God bless you guys.